This is that thing of why attachment types get on people about being mean, right?
Yes.
It's because you're just being clear. You know what I mean? As opposed to cutting off the possibility, again, using that abstract idea of family. If you're being clear, you're kind of cutting off the possibility of sort of a vague familial
Right,
or
right.
something.
Well, what's happening here is that you feel like you don't have autonomy, but you actually have autonomy. And here's how we deal with this feeling.
The big hormone enneagram.
Let me lay it on the line. I got a little freakiness inside. And to know that the man has got to deal with it.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, Golden Five Wing, 458 Trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with a 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8 wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Welcome to the Big Hormone Enneagram Show. Today, we are missing our shining boy, sexual 4, John Lukovich. He's not here with us, so it's just me, David, and John. No, me, David, and Nancy.
It's okay. You can forget about me. It's fine.
It's me, David, and Nancy. Talking today about attachment and just sort of going over some of the revelations that we've been having about attachment types from the soul intercourse episode, talking about how that shit applies to other areas of life and trying to still wrap our heads around what does it mean to be an attachment types and what are different ways that attachment types give up their autonomy or can't locate themselves, and what does that mean in terms of how attachment types live their lives. And so hopefully you guys get something out of this conversation.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I was sitting around thinking about like what we should talk about, but I've been just still stuck on the attachment stuff. I've been still thinking about it, and I still feel like there's a lot we could get into just in terms of what it means in terms of how attachment types not just deal with romance, because we talked about that, but what it means in terms of how they deal with life. And I've just
Yeah.
been trying to understand people for a long time, and I guess I just didn't understand that I didn't get this, and sort of seeing like the way that we project, our types onto other people. So I, for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, but the fact that I'm an 8 and my yes is a yes and my no is a no. Like I have a pretty good sense of what I like and what I don't like. And if I don't like you, I'm going to tell you I don't like you. And, like if I say I like that, I'm going to do it. If I don't, so I interpret people's saying positive things as, oh, this person genuinely means that they like that thing. What I did understand about the attachment type thing is that, all the 3 attachment types are kind of doing the adapting thing. So one person could, in one room, say, I'm for this thing and I'm really into it. And you might feel that they're really into you and whatever it is you're doing. And in the other room, because that room is against you, they would be saying whatever it takes to adapt to that room.
The other piece of it too is something I've mentioned once or twice before on maybe in the Courtney episodes, is part of the attachment thing is actually having ongoing kind of disagreement, and that's part of the attachment. You know what I mean? Your and it's sort of wanting to stay involved in the argument as opposed to just no, there's a wall, it's done, it's over. You're
Yeah.
actually wanting to keep the thing sort of festering, and that in itself is attachment. That's a part of it.
Okay.
So are you saying that attachment types will, how does that relate to what we're talking about? Attachment
Well,
types will
he-
like keep arguing to keep a relationship going,
No,
or
I think he's saying that the friction of being undecided or arguing within yourself where I'm on board but I'm not on board is part of keeping the attach is part of what
Mm.
is keeping the attachment going, which is kind of this thing that we've noticed with the way people react to us in the group, which is like they really like the content and they like what we're doing, but at the same time they don't approve of us as people or whatever. And so there's this like thing where they can't decide if they hate us or they love us, and it's both happening at once. And it's usually attachment types that are stuck in that friction point, which is sort of keeping the attachment with us going, which is I like their stuff, but I disapprove of this, that, and the other. And I guess he's saying that all attachment types have a way of doing that, of the undecidedness. Because for me, it's like make up your mind. You either like me or you don't. And when I meet someone, I pretty much know. And it's not something that I manufacture. Or I can even pretend. It's either yes or no. And I thought that everyone operates this way. So when people give me yes or no, I just interpreted, oh, okay, I'm not for you. That's cool. I'm going to go my way. You're going to go your way. But I didn't recognize that a lot of times attachment types are not even able to really locate their yes or no. And the yes is kind of like maybe, and it could change tomorrow, depending on what room you're in and what you're, who you're relating it to, what the context is, or all that stuff that I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that this was a whole orientation. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, because most people are attachment types.
Well,
There's a
it's
lot
it's
of attachment types.
it's just like sort of the familial thing of what attachment is. You know, you've got your, just speaking sort of generically, you've got your disagreements with certain family members and all this stuff, and all these dynamics with different family members, siblings, parents, and extended family and so forth. But you've got this idealization, let's say, around family and what it's supposed to be, and you're sort of compelled into that idealization. Again, it's that sort of, well, there's an idealization of home, right? Like you're supposed to keep adapting even though you've got these disagreements, and you're not willing to do the individuation of just cutting the thing off.
Mm.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, I want to hear from you, Nancy. Like, because I know you've talked about like the idea of people's thoughts sort of invading your mind, but how do you resonate with this thing of feeling like you have to be a different person depending on the room and the group of friends or whatever it is that you're in? And is that something that you've seen in yourself, and have you done anything about that, or is it just like that's just part and parcel of how it works, or like what are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Well, first off, I want to start off with the family thing. Because I have a really hard time accepting that I disagree with my family a
Mm,
lot.
Mhm.
Like on a just ideological level, I disagree with like 3 out of the 4 members of my family. Um, and that's like it's tough for me not to want to like bring it up every time I see them, because I want to see if they've changed their minds so that we can be on the same page again, because it feels like, like that's not how our family is supposed to interact.
mhm.
Um so that's like over the past like 2 years, that's kind of been like how we've interacted. It's been like weird. It's been this weird tension that I don't know how to like get rid of or handle.
Uh,
And I feel like a lot of people can just be like, yeah, I disagree with my family. Like, bleh. But I'm over here like, why?
mm,
Questioning it all.
A lot of people, but most people are attachment types, right? So it's most people are kind of doing some
yeah.
version of what you're describing.
It's true.
Well, it
Yeah.
it just got me thinking because we've been talking about recently attachment types and romance, and just realizing that part of the reason why most people are in unhappy relationships is because they were doing the attachment thing of this works and I don't want to be affected, but I want to be able to just maintain this, adapt to this relationship that's not ideal, and I'm just going to stick with that. And so what is that the implications of, okay, if you're doing romance that way, you're doing life that way, all of life is that way. And sometimes it got me thinking of like people thinking of like how did something like Hitler happen, you know
Mhm.
how does some fucking insane dictator type come out with these insane ideas that eventually everyone adopts and they do heinous things? And I was just sitting there thinking, like, if everyone is sort of, let's say, just say everyone being, most everyone being attachment types. I mean, we've thrown numbers out there, but let's just say it's like 70% of the population. And that is how people are orienting. And you come out with a message like that, that's coming from an authority figure, that even if people disagree with it, there's going to be this friction of trying to integrate what's coming down from this authority figure. And it just blew my mind. Like, I realized if people are doing this in their relationships, then that means they could be doing this with their politics.
That's 100% what they do with their politics. That's what politicians are. They're like 3s and 6s, or 3s and 9s.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an attachment type and you see a bunch of people doing a certain thing, going with a certain ideology or whatever, and it's probably some of this is social instinct combined with attachment.
Yeah.
You're gonna you're gonna feel compelled to sort of look into it and maybe even start to seep into it, in ways you didn't realize. And then sometimes that's what you're reacting against too, is that you sort of got infected because there was a mass group that did get into this thing, and it sort of is irritatingly pulling you to
Mhm.
just that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's one of the biggest things that made me start to at least try to individuate was Trump, because I saw how scary it was to watch people get sucked into that, and I could totally see my younger self getting sucked into that, because
Mm.
that's what I mean, that's what I grew up in. Like, I grew up in like, cornfield USA with guns and trucks and white men.
Yeah.
So I realized that, like, if I didn't get my shit together, there's a very good chance that I could get swept up in something that's really wrong. So what kind of like initiated my oh fuck.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been trying to wrap my head around this uh yes but no thing.
Yeah.
That's really what I feel, what I come away with attachment types. There's always like a yes but no, or no but yes thing, where straddling the line between in and out, like absorbing something but also kind of resisting it, and also not being able to locate where you're at. And so you're playing this game of, if I say yes, then I have to say no some other place, just to like
Yes.
not really, because I don't know. My yes and no is not clear to me. But um and
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, like, something even as, like, simple as, or, as ingrained in my life as, like, you guys or Brian. There's a constant, like, push and pull of,
Mm.
like, every Monday, I'm like, "Okay, like, we do the podcast today," and then my brain's like, "Yeah, but you could just quit the podcast. No one would ever know." And it's like, "Okay, but, like, I've been doing this for, like, I don't fucking know, a year and a half at this point." "Yeah, but you could just quit. Nobody will miss you." And it's like, okay.
So there's like always a push pull.
There's always a push-pull, and, like, with Brian, it's like, like, there's always, like, "Okay, we're gonna get married." "Yeah, but are you really going to get married? Are you
Well,
sure?"
it's a self-deprecation thing, and that's a piece of the adaptation, right?
Mm.
There's
Is
always an out.
maybe I'm really not worth taking up space in the quote unquote family. The bigger, whatever the setting is somewhat a family.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so I've got to, yeah, so do they really want me here? And so maybe I should start adapting, or,
Well,
you know
yeah,
what I
and
mean?
it's a little bit of that, like, it's safer if I always have kind of half a toe out the door, right?
Yep.
Because, like, if you guys are ever like, "Okay, well, we don't want you on the pod anymore." I'm like, "Yeah, well, I didn't care anyway." You know, like, it's
Yeah.
a little bit rejection-y in that way. Like, it's just like, if Brian breaks up with me, it's like, well,
Yeah.
I always knew it was gonna end.
I think what I end up seeing is, at least with some attachment types that we've, some of the reactions that we've gotten over the years, is that people get pulled into our stuff, but they have to somehow maintain that we're problematic.
Mhm.
So this is definitely like an attachment type thing. It's like I am aware that I'm getting sucked into this vortex. And in reaction to that, I have to push into the idea that, there's something wrong with them, even as I'm getting pulled in. So, and the more that they get pulled in, the more they have to push into the idea that there's a problem with us. And so we've seen this. I mean, it's such a pattern now that it's interesting to me to observe the pattern repeat itself, where people can't decide. Like the more that people love us, the more they have to generate hate for us somewhere
Mhm.
else, and it's usually not integrated into one person. It reminds me of that meme that has been going around where people there's a cat with different multicolored patches on themselves, where this is like showing up to the party where different friends are at, and they have to reintegrate all the different parts of themselves that they show for different friends in one room. And
That's
like
gonna be my wedding.
so it's like maybe in one room it's like, oh, any grammar people are just amazing, their content is great. And in another room is like, these guys are full of themselves and they're fucking assholes or whatever, and they think they know, just like you can't instead of just saying I like these guys, they have faults, just saying yes or no, but it's like in an, one foot out the door, so that regardless of how things fall, you can always say, yeah, I always like them, or no, I always thought they were shit, depending
Mhm.
on who it is you're talking to. And sometimes people do it at the same time in the
Yeah.
same room,
Yeah.
where it's like I can't, you can't really locate how I feel about this thing. I have to be for it, but I also have to be against it.
And
It's
it's like,
partly
again, it's not even a choice that I'm actively making, right? Like I will find myself actively contradicting myself like 2 seconds after and I'm like, but I feel both ways.
Ah,
So like when
well,
I'm talking, I'll be like, well, I just contradicted myself. I hope nobody fucking notices that.
it's also you as an attachment type, you might be getting into something like, say you're getting into the weird thing that is us right here, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got a chip on your shoulder, totally unconsciously, deeply unconsciously, about the fact that you are adapting and you are getting sucked into this
Uh-huh.
thing, and
Yeah.
you're irritated with yourself in a certain way, that you are conforming, even if you actually are liking something.
yeah.
It's sort of taking your will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very, very annoying. I've totally experienced that too. Yeah.
So yeah, it goes back to this thing that I've experienced of I didn't know or understand that attachment types, which the majority of people were, when they'd say yes to me or say no to me, that it was kind of like an undecided or yes or no.
Mhm.
It wasn't really like a definitive yes or no. And so I'd had these situations where someone was like, no, I don't think I want to see you, or I don't want to date you. And I'm like, okay, cool. You're not interested in me. That's fine. And then they're like, hey, I miss you. Like a couple weeks later, I'm like, what was that? Like,
Yeah, I've
you know,
totally done that.
just like I'm like, so let's talk about that. Like, it was just like it feels to me literally like a split personality disorder, because it's like one person likes me and the other personality doesn't think I'm shit, and the third doesn't care, and I'm just like, which one is going to show up? And then maybe all three can show up at the same time in the same person, and I'm like, so is it that internally you can't even find it?
Yeah. Like there's no differentiate. Like it's when you're aware of it, it's just as frustrating for us as it is for you. Like
Oh,
obviously it's hurting your emotions a little bit more than it's hurting us, but it's like we don't know what's fucking happening. It's very frustrating.
In some ways, you could, as an attachment type, you could kind of adapt to almost anybody.
Anything. Yes. 100%.
wow, wow.
Yeah.
That's what makes dating as an attachment type so hard. That's why I stopped pursuing people, because I was like, I'm so sick of doing this game where it's like, oh, well, I like you. I don't really like you now, but I kind of like you, but I kind of don't, but I kind of don't care. And it's like, I'm just going to fucking stop because I'm sick of it. I'm tired.
So, like, we got into in the last call, I think, because I think John had asked, like, so how do you know that you are encountering a real, attraction that's not just you adapting? And I think Alexander said that fear, real anxiety and
Yes.
fear.
Yeah.
And that's how you know that you're really being affected. And how often does that happen?
It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. I mean, yeah, if I can't flirt with you, then I actually care about you. Like if I'm like a bumbling idiot around you, then like and I'm trying like if I was single, right? I'm
Mhm.
saying
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
in a relationship form. If I'm a
Right.
bumbling idiot, then I have feelings for you, actual
Mhm.
feelings.
Right.
But if I can flirt with you,
Mm.
if I can be hot and sexy and get your attention and be smooth, then no, I don't give a fuck.
Hmm. So would you say that that applies to not just, of course, not just to dating, but just in other areas of your life where if you're really affected, then it's how you locate it for yourself? Like, how do you locate yourself in other areas of your life? Like, for example, you're moving to Netherlands. Uh, like, how did you, or have you located how you really feel about that?
Um, not really. Um, when I was younger, I used to be able to do this thing where like I would just make a snap decision, and if I regretted it a couple weeks later, then I knew that I was on the right path.
Mm.
So
Wait,
I
wait, wait.
think,
Hold on. Say that again. If you regretted the decision, you knew you were on the right path.
yeah, like if I decided to go on a trip, and then a couple weeks before the trip, I was like, oh fuck, like this is not what I want to do. I'm like, okay, that's probably what I want to do then. Now I think it's a little different because that was when I was like
Hmm.
young. Like so now I think I'm a little bit more in tune with what I actually want, but I still don't really know.
Mm.
um I think some of the best ways to do it are to sit with it alone
Hmm.
and then to not like do anything with social media about it for a while
Hmm.
and just sort of kind of sit with the idea for a while. But even then, I mean, I still question whether or not I want to move to the Netherlands. I have no idea.
What about you, David? Like, how do you find it? How you feel about things?
I have no idea. Um,
Great. It doesn't get any fucking easier, is what you're telling me.
um,
When you were younger versus now, have you like gotten any better at figuring out like, all right, I think this is a legit thing for me versus I'm just kind of doing my
well,
nine program,
yeah. Well, so it is. I am very special because I've got 7 and 4 fixes, and I'm
So special.
Yeah.
and social last. I mean, I've always had specific things I'm into.
Right.
I don't really have that thing. I don't really have the thing of, I mean, as far as interests or what music I like, what
Right.
art I like. I mean, some art, or music is just shit, and it's a fact that it's shit.
Right.
I don't give a fuck
I want to
if
hear what
anybody else
music is
is.
shit.
Well, we'll do that. That's another
That's
episode.
another episode.
Oh my goodness.
Um, so that's another kind of mini conversation is being, well, partly, the trifix thing, but also being social last
Hmm.
and being an attachment type, because there's a sort of overlapped in a way with
Yeah.
social instinct, and also my model, so as an attachment type, attaching to my mother, who was my sole family member.
Hmm.
She was a type 1, and with 7 and 4 fixes, and she was SPSX. So we were actually similar typologically. Um, and so I adapted to that, right? Which is I can be super one-ish and critical, and those people are fucking idiots. And you know what I mean? That kind of
Mm-hmm.
one-ish thing
You
of
can be.
those people are stupid as fuck. You know what I mean? That kind of attitude.
Right.
I can do that really easily. Yeah, I don't really. I mean, it's so on a day-to-day level, me running into people are, so this is where I'm more just incidentally attachment y, is
Hmm.
that people come up to me, people, I interact with people, and I can do kind of interaction with anybody and kind of
Yes.
do a quick bonding thing, and teasing and joking, and I kind of do this is kind of attachment, I guess. My iteration of it is I do overly familiar bonding, like
Yeah.
as if I already know the person, and I'll
Yes.
start teasing them about something about themselves. And that and so that's kind of attachment in that sense that people feel people come to me as if I'm already familiar to them.
Right. Right. That's definitely something. Even online, it's pretty noticeable in
Yeah.
that. At least, at least I'm getting better impressions of what people have of me socially. Is that people end up feeling like they can't touch me. I mean, that's
Yep.
generally by design, but you have much more open boundaries. Uh, just people generally feel like they can talk to you, and you're more interactive, and even in person, that's true too. Just of course, with social blind, there's kind of a separation there that people can feel compared to other nines, but in general, people just feel like they can relate to you, and it's interesting just that people in even in the writing style because you're cryptic but still kind of pulling people in. Like people are inevitably
Yeah.
falling into your writing. Whereas,
Hmm.
regardless of what I try to do, I guess if I just just writing as myself, I mean, how else am I going to write? That people just end up feeling like that I'm not with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely the feeling of more invitation that I'm doing. And
Yes.
also like even with my crazy enneagrammic theoretical wild magician stuff, I'm assuming that anybody could see the same stuff that I'm stumbling upon. Any of these discoveries I've made with the Enneagram, I'm assuming, well, guys, it's just all there. I
Mm.
mean, why aren't you could be doing the same thing and it's not that big a deal.
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of attachment-y right there. I'm whatever self deprecating, denigrating, or whatever, and just assuming that I'm just picking out some interesting, fish in the soup, or
Hmm.
whatever.
I always kind of assume that someone else has already said it.
Mm.
I don't know if you feel that way, David, because you're more of,
Special.
special, yeah, than me. But I know that's like my touch because like
It's more
I'll,
cool.
yeah, like before I post something anywhere, like on the chat or anything, like I will go back and read and search words to see if someone else has said the same thing because I'm like, someone must have said this before me. Like it
Mm.
has to have been said.
Uh, I just go ahead and say what I'm going to say, and I assume I probably am repeating something that somebody already said.
So you also feel that, but you just say it anyway.
Yeah. I do a lot of. I know that I repeat a lot, and I like to hear sort of echoes of my own voice.
Oh, okay. I don't.
Yeah.
I know
So,
that.
Like, oh, don't let me bother you with this
mm,
insignificant thought.
I know that I could be saying something that someone else has said, but I know that my lens is going to be. It's not going to feel the same. Like I could,
Huh.
David or John might say something. I know that some people, most people, may not understand what the fuck they're saying. That if I translate it, it's going to feel like I said something different, even though I didn't.
So if I
mm,
say something and someone doesn't relate to it or agree with it at all, it feels like I said something wrong.
yeah, I don't relate to that one because
I know you
I'm
don't.
usually saying a lot of things that are very wrong.
Yeah, I
So that's
know.
got to be social, probably then.
Partly,
Partly, okay.
I have
yeah,
no
I
idea.
think so. I think so. And it might be having, six fix, just
Mm,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
there's that support piece, of six combined with social, is am I casting, somewhat of a wide net or attaching into a grid work of,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was
If
interesting what Nancy said about in the last one that she doesn't know what she does, but she really knows what other people do, like what people do.
mhm.
And yeah, I was just sitting there thinking, like, if you're so aware of what other people do, then yeah, how do you Is it just because you're tracking what other people are doing? Like you're just paying attention to what other people are saying all the time? Like, how do you know what people do? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I mean, I track it a lot. I
How?
visually, audio, like all of it. Like I often feel like I'm socially awkward because I am trying to keep up with what people are doing.
Mm, okay.
So like I'm trying to see like okay, what kind of social cues is this person giving off during this conversation? Because I want to know because in this situation I would have done this and I feel like that wouldn't have landed well. So like, what is
Mm.
this person doing? And this is
Mm.
all happening during a conversation, and then like someone will ask me something and I'm like, nope. Like I wasn't here. Um, so yeah, I do a lot of like tracking and watching. And like so when I was little, my mom wouldn't let me watch certain shows because I would start acting like the character within minutes of seeing the show.
Oh wow.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
like there is a show called Caillou,
Mhm.
and the kid is like really annoying, like a really annoying kid. And when I was little, I watched like one episode and I immediately started acting like him. And my mom was like, all right, we can't let you watch this because I would just be like, okay, well, this is my mirror. This is what I do now.
Mhm.
So it was like, and that was like when I was like 3 or 4.
Mm.
It's just constant.
David, do you relate to that? Is that like a social thing or attachment thing? Do you feel yourself, even with your 7-4 fixes, getting pulled and absorbed into shit? Like,
When I was a kid, I would definitely absorb certain things in TV and movies, but because I was, withdrawn type or whatever, I wasn't particularly acting it out in that
mm,
way.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I can't quite relate to it that way.
Now, something that came up earlier was David, you mentioned that there are like certain things for you that you like music and art that you're like, I like this, I don't like this. One way that I can kind of locate myself is like when I'm riding horses and sometimes when I'm hiking if I'm alone.
Mhm.
Those are really the only two things that I can do that like I can locate myself in.
Yeah, I don't know that I mean, I'm pretty specific about, with three frustration types in action with one wing 7-4, I kind of, I disparage things easily, you know,
Mm.
and I'm
I know.
really picky. Yeah, I just yeah, it's pretty fast and yeah, don't really have that issue.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about like one, there's your type, and then there's a sort of like baseline psychological environment that you grew up in, depending on what parents you have or what the overall family dynamic that you have. And so, my dad's an 8, my mom's a 2, so those are two Hexad types. I have an 8 sister, and I have 1 3 sister.
Mhm.
So the dynamic of my family is a lot of loud people who have their own opinions, and no one cares if anyone really agrees with anyone else.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? Like it's just like we can just argue about sports or politics, and my dad has his point of view, my 8 sister has her point of view, I have my point of view, and we'll just yell for 2 3 hours, and then that's it, and we just go out eat dinner, and then totally normal. And I realized, once I grew up and moved there, away to college, people don't talk to people like this.
Yeah.
Like
Do you think
this,
it's also cultural? Like, is that
that's part of it too. But
yeah?
I've seen Nigerians with that were attachment families, like 9s and 6s or whatever.
And they don't act that way.
They don't act that way. Like Od, my best friend who's hung out with me and my sisters, he all of a sudden understood me better because he was like,
Mm.
"Oh, you guys are all like this." Like, you because like disagreement is nothing to me. Like I
Whereas with
could
attachment types, it's like there's disagreement, but it's bothering you.
right.
Yeah.
There are things that I will never see eye to eye with any member of my family. It's just I feel like I expect individuals to have things that they will never agree with me about, and that's totally normal. Like like, and that's not a problem. That does not even get in the way of our relationship. It's like, you feel this way about this thing and I feel this way about it. We can yell about it and just be fine. And I recognize that, some people would take that the wrong way of having, like, let's say we have an Enneagram argument, and people take it as like a real problem. But I don't take that personally. It's like when you start to get personal, that's when I take it personally. But I find that
That's in-
interesting.
That's interesting, yeah, because it's like beliefs, ideas, ideologies, philosophies with attachment types. You're taking that personally.
Hmm.
So like so you could have like a political like argument with someone who's like on completely on the other spectrum and you wouldn't take it
Well,
personally.
no.
You would
I mean, yeah, I mean, like say my parents are Trump supporters, and I have a problem with that. But
okay.
for example, let's talk about something a little bit more neutral. Like, one thing I noticed that happens with the group, and I had to realize that I was blindsided by how personally people were taking typings.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because that's not
Mhm.
political. This is just a personality system that was discovered, and for all we know, this is just all made up stuff. And we identified what your type is, but people take it personally as some kind of statement on who they are, and they get really riled up about it.
As if
And
they're going to change based on how we type them.
exactly. And
Well, if
my
they're an attachment type, they might.
Right.
exactly.
Exactly.
So I just couldn't wrap my head around, like, like you do a typing session. It's like, I always tell people, like, at the end of the day, you decide. You decide.
No. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, an attachment type does not decide.
Yeah. But
They
like,
have the
that's what I'm
decision made for them.
right. Like, they have to reconcile the viewpoints that are at play. But for me,
Right, but for you it's not.
like hexad types can, well, I don't know if all hexad types, but I just felt like, take this input, like this input, your input or your opinion of me may not have any bearing on me at all. I will take
Mhm.
input from it without it feeling like it's going to threaten my sense of self. Like if David says, "Hey, I noticed that you do this, this, and this, and this, and I think you might be this type," and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. You have this point of view. I'm going to consider it, and I'm either going to take something from it or I'm going to completely reject it as bullshit."
Mhm.
I think I've said this on here before, but this reminds me of when I was first seeing my therapist and I was complaining about work and how like I got some criticism at work and I disagreed with it, but like I was really upset because they misunderstood me and like blah blah blah. And she was like, "Do you know that like someone can have that opinion of you and you don't have to agree with it?"
Huh?
And I was like, "No." She's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." That's like been in the back of my head all the time. Like, I have to, if someone says something about me, I have to be like, if you don't agree with it, it doesn't mean it's real. Like, it just because they said it, it doesn't mean it's real. Like, I have to have that like pep talk with myself. And sometimes it still doesn't work.
So this just interesting for me as an eight, just the implications on what this means about how people operate in mass. Because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, holy shit, if someone diabolical
Oh,
understands
yeah.
that people operate
We're
this way,
fucked.
you can literally
Yeah.
make anyone believe
Well,
anything.
We are fucked. Absolutely.
Jesus Christ, this is like,
well,
it blows my mind. It literally blows me away.
this is very misogynist or whatever, but like Hitler said, the masses are a woman, and what he means is you a guy can go fuck the masses and insert an ideology or a whatever a social whatever a philosophy or
Mhm,
whatever and
mhm.
inseminate it into the masses and swing the whole fucking nation into your camp.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, Hitler knew.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's-
and we see how that went.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
grand.
It actually
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredible well, just understanding attachment is a huge step for me, because yeah, it's really hard to wrap my head around that, but it makes a lot of sense in terms of the many things about people that I haven't been able to understand because I'm projecting my own stuff onto the way people act. Even like an example, like Nancy, you talked about like me asking you to make a collage of people you're attracted to. I just assume everyone can do that because
Yeah.
I can
Right.
do that. I feel like it's like one of the easiest things I could do. I could
Mhm.
get to very
Yeah.
micro details on like I like this, I don't like this.
It
That
took
kind
me
of.
hours.
You only came up with like 3 or 4 people.
I
I was
know,
like,
and it took me hours. I was
Yeah.
sitting at work and I was like, do I find this person attractive? I don't know.
wait. But just we are all doing that. Like we're all projecting our type stuff on other
Yep.
people, and it's interesting to see how majority of people are have social and are attachment types, and the sort of reactions that people have to this podcast or to the group. That regardless of how people feel about things, if they have social, they're going to assume that the things we're doing are coming from the place of doing social.
Kind of wish Alexandra was still here because I would love to hear her opinion on it.
Mhm.
But I feel like a big part of individuating as an attachment type is coming to terms with how many things have happened in your life that you had a hand in that you didn't want to
Mm.
happen. So it feels really enraging because it feels like if people had just taken the time to be like, are you sure?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The shit that I didn't want to have happen wouldn't have happened in my life. But I feel like they didn't take the time. So coming to terms with that anger and like you had a hand in your own trauma
And
is
and that's
like
part of what
some
I mean with
awful shit.
and that's part of what I mean with the chip on your shoulder when you're an
Right.
attachment type. And that's why, sixes and nines especially get so agitated, around the whole typing process and so forth, as if they're being taken or
Mhm.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we, at least for someone who's somewhat awake, we don't want that to happen again. So it's like,
Mm.
I don't want to have a hand in more trauma of mine. So, like, don't tell me anything because
Yeah.
now I'm overcorrecting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We had that issue because initially we were doing it for free because we enjoyed doing it. And people started just, projecting all kinds of stuff, just and stuff that they freely requested.
Hmm.
And I just couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. It's like you're asking us to type you, and then you're going off about what we told you, like we did something to you. We're literally strangers on the internet that you asked for an opinion from. You trusted our expertise for some reason, and we gave it to you, and now it's our fault. And so it's like,
Yep.
okay, let's create a wall here where one, you gotta pay for this because that means you're probably gonna think about it a little bit longer.
Mhm.
But even still, we still run into things where people feel some type of way. It's like you invested in this service and you still come away feeling that we did something to you when you requested for it, you paid for it. It's just like I'm just some guy on it. I mean, of course, this is like me deleting social. Like I'm just some guy on the internet that you're listening to that you can completely disregard, but at the same time, like there is like some authority projected on me because I have expertise. We've created this group and this whole thing, and that's on one hand like respecting that authority, but also feeling like I'm getting pulled into this, but I also have to push against this in some other way. Um, so just seeing that dichotomy, it's like I haven't been able to understand it, but now I think I'm starting to get it. It's kind of like having a difficult time locating yourself, whether you're in or out. So you have to kind of straddle that line of contradicting yourself, whether you're in or out. You can't make up your mind whether you're into this thing or not. So you
Yeah.
start doing some contradictory shit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the shit that you hear of like people getting frustrated with like, oh well, these people need safe spaces and they're so soft and like blah blah blah. They're talking about attachment types trying to figure out who the fuck they are and what the fuck is going on
Yep.
because we want a
Yep.
safe space where you aren't going to talk to us
Mhm.
and
And
give
influence us.
opinion. Yeah, no influencing. Safe space, safe space.
Mm.
And that's why I feel like so much of the generation is like this because there are so many attachment types.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That just I'm just being turning this over in my mind as to sort of the reactions we have, people that seemingly being pulled into our stuff, who on one hand seem really into it, but on the other hand are just talking mad shit or feeling,
And
like,
yeah, it's like Mason Scott.
yeah, right.
It's just a perfect example of it.
What a perfect example.
Yeah,
We
that's
were
exactly
invited.
what happened.
We were invited to a podcast.
Yeah, and they got mad at us. Yeah, and they felt, I totally get it. That's why when Mace said that, I was like, I feel that. Like, I get it, but it pisses me off. But I get it.
Mhm.
You lose your autonomy.
We're referring to the No Small Thing podcast.
The No Small Thing podcast. Perfect example. But I mean, that was a great example, and this is something that always blindsides me, and it's something that I'm trying to learn because I keep having to getting shocked by the idea that someone would pull out the red carpet for us and say, "You guys are great. We really like your stuff," and deal with us, and then on the backside, still be passive aggressively harboring like really negative feelings about what we're up to. And it's like, hey, make up your mind. Like, I'm fine if you hate me. I'm actually very comfortable with. I prefer it, honestly. I expect it. What I'm uncomfortable with is when people are like truly undecided, like
Yeah.
they're really actually into what we're doing, but at the same time, like not.
And I mean, like, that is, I don't want to create a hierarchy of emotional awareness, but that is some like shit when that is some shit that you're able to point to and be like, you are completely emotionally unaware in this one instance. You have no idea that you are feeling like you don't have autonomy, but that's not accurate. And
That's
it's
right.
like, I wish someone had been able to point that out for me when I was younger. Is like, well, what's happening here is that you feel like you don't have autonomy, but you actually have autonomy. And here's how we deal with this feeling. Like, learning that would have been just so useful for young Nancy.
So here's my question, because even as I recognize that people are doing this, my instinct is to try to still put them on one side or the other, because it seems like to me, from my perspective, is that you're having a hard time deciding or recognizing that you are actually on one side or the other.
Right. And therefore it must be the negative side.
Well, yeah, I always assumed that this is
Yeah.
probably the negative side, but now I'm understanding is that the problem is that they don't know what side they're on. And the fact that they started out on one side means that they have to push to the other side and vice versa. Like,
Yeah.
like being on both sides is the thing. Am I right?
Yeah.
Don't quite. I mean, I don't quite know. I guess.
Like I'm saying, like, okay, so these people having these like can't make up their mind if they love us or hate us. I'm assuming they hate us, but they have to be passive aggressive about it. But now I'm starting to understand is that they don't know themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. They don't know the degree of their agreement and disagreement.
Right. And there's no like, it's really hard to say, I agree with this, but I don't agree with that. Right. So it'd be really hard to be like, I like that you guys say this on the podcast, but I don't really like that you have a person on there that used to be a sex worker or something like that. Like, it would be really hard to delineate what you do and don't like. You just know that sometimes you do and sometimes you don't.
Because again, it's about family in an abstract way, right? So if you're rejecting one thing absolutely about somebody, then that person might not, well, you're just shutting off the possibility of family in a certain way. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So you kind of have to be vague about what it is that you're rejecting and accepting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that you can kind of keep the connection going.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's complicated.
No, this is really good stuff because I've been just like, just like awakening to what attachment means and how it operates, and wow.
Yeah. It's crazy.
One thing that I did want to say that I feel like you've mentioned about you thinking it's weird that attachment types think the Hexad types are cool. Is it's so exhausting never knowing where you are trying to locate yourself that it is really cool to just have a location. So just an FYI, that's what's going on.
Yeah, and that's why specifically that 4, 5, 8 trifix is the biggest mistype
Mhm.
with attachment types, because that's
We want that.
that's the most, that's sort of the most against in every single center. That's the most against you can be,
Mhm.
is to be a 5, a 4, and an 8.
Mhm. And God, it would be nice to be that specific. So it gives unspecific people, that typing gives unspecific people something to be specific about.
One thing is just generically the condition of having an ego. The ideal for any ego, or one of the ideals, would be just solipsistic. I don't need anyone, and I genuinely don't need anyone, and I'm perfectly self-sufficient and uninfluenced by anyone, and I have just absolute sacrosanct autonomy. That's
That's the
not going to be
dream.
that's the dream of
That's the dream.
yeah. And so that's what that trifix, for example, or those types as individual types or whatever, represent unconsciously to people.
And I mean, it's not accurate, but that is what they
Right.
represent.
Right.
Well, I guess that's what, I think somebody said in the group that uh, it's nice when we have an attachment type on, or to really kind of explain, even if they're saying the same
Mhm.
thing that we're saying, that people kind of connect to it, because on some level, Hexad
Mhm.
types trigger attachment types.
Yeah, we hate y'all.
So
And also love you.
just like having, that was a profound kind of statement. Yeah, just I guess, provocative attachment types are provoking people on in a different way than the Hexad types are.
Yeah. So Nancy, you're saying you don't know quite how much you want to align or unalign
With us.
with a, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's still on the fence.
I'm gonna be on the fence till the day that I die.
Mm.
Well, it is interesting to kind of wrap my head around that, because it's sort of like the sixth thing, where the six is always kind of straddling contradiction always, and to
Mhm.
see that that's inherent to the attachment type thing, where it's like I'm not really all the way into anything. I'm trying to figure it out myself. Like, where am I? And if I push into this direction, or if I absorb too far into this direction, there's going to be this counter reaction to push into the other way, because I don't
Mhm.
know. And that's just a really interesting framework for me to try to wrap my head around. That's like really fucking not something that I have any experience, or like I didn't grow up in a family with people, like I just seeing that that's kind of how the zeitgeist operates is like really fucking interesting.
Mhm.
This is why we have a hard time getting anything done.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a world, why we
Yes,
aren't green yet,
exactly.
why we don't have full globalization. This is why we struggle with everything, because we're like,
Yep.
we just need some fucking Hexad types, but not Trump
Or Biden.
or Hitler. Just none of the above.
Yeah.
Maybe a nice Bernie would be great.
But then there's always these binary things with the conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, and as long as there are big chunks like that, then we're never gonna go anywhere.
No, we're just, I mean, we're doomed, really. But
Yeah.
hey, it is what it is. Hopefully, we'll die before it ends.
Yeah, this is an interesting lens to continue to explore other aspects of life, because this is generally the human orientation, because this
Yep.
is most humans. And so trying to understand politics, starts to make a lot more sense from the attachment perspective, or, understanding romance and how people deal with romance. Just it helps to understand that, like, this is what the attachment style is, because that's generally what you're going to run into. And it's been interesting to me that my longest relationships had been, up until now, had been with uh, Hexad types. Like, I just struck out repeatedly with attachment types. I didn't understand what the fuck I was doing or what I was dealing with. But no, this has just been really interesting. I think it's just going to be an ongoing thing, just uncovering what attachment means in different layers of life. Cool. That was pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
Some meaty stuff there.
Yeah.
Because I think I feel four people is like the max.
Yeah, it is.
And 3 people is comfortable.
It's easier to like get a word
Jump in.
Yeah.
You know, especially without John. You should leave that in, by the way.
Yes.
It's so much easier to talk when there is an Egypt
Yeah.
freak on the pod.
Can you fucking like? We've had 6 people on the pod before.
That I never enjoyed this.
It's a
I mean,
lot.
aside from the fact that I didn't have to talk.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. All right. Well, talk to you soon.
All right, talk to you guys later.
Okay.
Bye.
Later.
Bye.